Chapter 21 False Apotheosis. Nightmare wouldn't fight anymore. When he was given food, he would eat. When he was given clothes to change, he would change. When the doctor was sent to check his health, he didn't resist. In his mind, perhaps, it was better to give that win to Toriel rather than Asgore, hoping she might help him any way she could. Still, he had not given up on leaving this place. His desire to return to his kingdom, and especially to Killer, remained intact. He had absolute certainty that his friends would not let his capture go unpunished. For now, he needed to wait. Over the years, Nightmare had heard that Toriel and Asgore chose to finally have a son, and adopted a human child as well. So much for waiting for him and Dream's approval. Although Nightmare was curious about the children, he didn't think it appropriate to ask, nor did Toriel offer to tell. A few days after he started eating, Nightmare was escorted to a court to attend his sham trial. He considered it a sham simply as his position in society made it impossible for him to be judged fairly by those in attendance. For the first time, his home city would look upon his corrupted form. Though rumors had spread of his appearance from Rivaldo, it was quite different for his people to witness what had actually become of him. Crowds gathered outside of the courthouse. For those who had been allowed in, there didn't seem to be a consistent stance on his judgment as far as Casilda's murder. Everyone was far too preoccupied with his appearance, wondering what happened to Dream's dear twin. The witnesses to the murder were the king, the queen, and the guards who had been stationed that night. In addition, the fact that Nightmare wasn't allowed to speak in his own voice, as any release from the collar would open his escape, the odds were stacked against him. The courtroom was illuminated by open windows above. The air was heavy with the smell of humans and monsters ushering about to get a look at him. Flanked by 4 guards, Nightmare's hands and legs were bound in irons. After all the evidence was presented to the judge, an old toad monster, Nightmare was finally able to give his defense, though only written. He didn't bother with any details, just the facts. My body was violated by 12 or more humans at the behest of Prince Nero, and then I was mortally wounded by my brother Dream. I was frightened and fled. When I tried to return to Toriel and Asgore, Casilda approached us quickly, which frightened me again, so I killed her. After what the humans did, I believe my reaction was understandable. The judge read aloud, his statement through thick spectacles. Yes, he was admitting to the murder, but at the very least he hoped it would end this embarrassing display quickly. His guilt assured, he was finally sentenced to 100 years of imprisonment and labor, although, given his status as a guardian of the tree, he couldn't be allowed to mix with regular prisoners. Therefore, his labor would be that of paperwork for the city's university, primarily in translating manuscripts. When he was finally brought back to his cell, Nightmare's nerves were unable to ease until darkness fell. No, he would not be forced to stay here for 100 years. That cut too much from his plans to convert the humans to his death cult, but most of all, it meant losing the life he intended to live with Killer. He would continue to cooperate, but he refused to submit to the sentencing fully until he heard word from his friends. Along with a desk, writing instruments, and manuscripts he was given to work on, Nightmare would be afforded additional amenities, hygiene supplies, extra blankets, a carpet, a curtain for privacy, as well as books he requested for leisure, with the exception that he was barred from reading any magical texts. He set to work translating textbooks from various languages, if only to keep his mind occupied from his situation. Toriel would visit him many more times for breakfast, but he wrote very little words in response to her conversations. Writing all day and night was exhausting on its own, and he was still bitter about his sentencing. Over a month had passed. One night, Nightmare was turning in to sleep. One of the guards called to him, saying he had a visitor. A visitor? At this hour? This wasn't going to be something good. Steeling himself, he rubbed his socket before pulling the curtain aside from the end of his bed. Walking into his view was a guard, and Chujin. The guardian was rather surprised. What was he doing here? The gray fox looked like he had grown a few extra silver hairs, his eyes dark under the glasses as he cleared his throat. Nightmare, I need your help. Oh, how interesting. Folding his arms, the dark skeleton cocked his head, as if to express how rich the irony was. We received a letter from your generals. They have my wife held hostage. I know it's stupid for me to ask, but please write a letter to them to request her release." Raising a brow, Nightmare was astonished by the gall of his request. Getting up, he went to his desk to retrieve a notepad and pencil before returning to the bed and scribbling a message. "What do I get in return?" "I will pension for a reduction of your imprisonment to 75 years instead of 100. Nightmare's head lurched back in a menacing but utterly silent laugh, his soul tickled by such a horrible deal. Shaking his head, he wrote on his notepad, "Guess your wife will have to rot behind bars like me." Please, surely that's a reasonable request. Please, I can't. Please don't let my family be torn apart like this." "If I should have to lose my lover, then it's only karma that you should too for betraying me," he wrote. "Oh, you're..." As the scientist internalized his words, he realized Nightmare's dilemma. Even after 75 years, his lover would likely be dead by then. Hanging his head, Chujin sighed. "I'll take no less than my immediate release for your wife's freedom. A prisoner for a prisoner. A fair exchange," Nightmare wrote next. "You wouldn't even need the king's permission. Only unlock this damn collar, and I will ensure her safety. Honestly, it's more than you deserve." Chujin lowered his brow as he read Nightmare's words quietly. "No, I won't do that. Even if I betrayed Asgore, Shiroba would never forgive me." "Then I suppose neither of us get what we want," Nightmare wrote, giving the scientist only a second to read it before closing the curtain. Getting back in bed, he could hear Chujin sigh before the door at the end of the hall opened to let him out. The blighted skeleton closed his eyes, expecting nothing else for the rest of the evening. The glow from the guards' lanterns would eventually go out, enveloping him in total darkness. As the hours of the night passed, Nightmare rested in peaceful oblivion, dreamless in a timeless void. That rest would abruptly end when a gauntlet-covered hand grabbed him by the throat, viciously ripping him from bed. His scream came out as nothing more than a heavy wheeze, hands gripping at the metal around his throat before his body was slammed on the hard floor, barely protected by the carpet. Gasping for air, his socket shot up. His vision was dazed as he was slammed down several more times, feeling the back of his skull crack. Someone much larger than him stood over him, their armor barely making a sound. Red, crimson eyes glowed in the dark, filled with complete loathing as they bared down upon him. He could never mistake the wretched stench of human flesh that his assaulter embodied. Legs flailing, trying to make any noise, an iron foot came down, crushing his thigh, shooting pain up his spine. No, not again. He was back in that place again under the tree, where Nero watched his suffering. The armored human continued to hold him by the throat. Nightmare felt his warm blood already leaking onto the carpet. A moment more, and the human began punching his ribs over and over. The only sound he could hear were his bones cracking. Overwhelmed by the pain and the memories, Nightmare felt his body going numb, the sensation of warm blood against his back as his body started to go cold. "Nightmare!" Was it dream? No. The voice was familiar, but not his brother. The iron bars unlocked and swung open as a lantern illuminated the darkness. A blur of gold and blue, the face of Martlet came into focus. "Gods, no! Call the doctors, quickly!" she shouted back at those with her. He felt her feathers over his wound, trying to heal him, enough to stop the bleeding. "Nightmare, stay awake! Please, for the sake of us all, stay awake!" Trying to speak, the color kept him silent. He should have never gotten on that damn carriage 12 years ago. He should have stayed in the grove with Dream. He should have trusted his brother's suspicion and never left Edenfall. Despite his effort, Nightmare slipped in and out of consciousness. He was taken from the prison to the hospital, where several doctors and healers had been awakened to tend to him. As they mended his bones, Nightmare thought the guards must have seen Dream bleeding upon the stump. That's why he saw Martlet. She must have flown to the prison, knowing something was happening to him. "Wake the warden, the captain, the guard, and the king! Someone tried to kill Nightmare, and by killing him, killing us all!" Martlet commanded. "We must find who is responsible for this!" In and out, Nightmare faded back to darkness. There in the black awaited those crimson eyes, watching with murderous gaze. He felt their vision burning the edge of his socket. All was quiet. The burning sensation was the light of the morning sun shining through a window. Head heavy, wrapped in bandaging, Nightmare slowly opened his eye. He smelled that scent again, human. Standing next to him, a female nurse leaned over the bed, checking the dressing around his ribs. Jaw agape, Nightmare lurched at the woman in rage, but his arms were shackled to the sides of the bed. Leaping back, the woman yelped as the skeleton continued fighting against his bonds, his teeth gritting as pain shot out from his fresh wounds. "What's going on?" a voice echoed in the hall. "He's awake! He's trying to get out of bed!" the nurse cried, running from the room. A crane-headed doctor poked his head in and groaned. "Ah, hell, let in the guards! Someone has to hold him down or else he's going to crack his wounds open!" However, dizziness would do the job for them, Nightmare's eyelight rolling back as he stopped struggling. 4 guards came in, along with the doctor, a human nurse, and a monster nurse with a hippo head. As Nightmare felt the doctor checking his bandaging, his gaze would focus again on the human, breathing heavily through his nostrils. The doctor lifted his head between the skeleton and the girl, as to not swing his beak around, which made him even more bird-like in behavior. The look in his eyes showed he realized their mistake. "I see. Rachel, I don't want you coming in here. Put up a notice on the door to keep humans out of this room." Yes, sir," said the human, nodding her head as she rushed out. Closing his socket, Nightmare let the doctor prod his body to be sure he hadn't hurt himself, falling unconscious before he had finished. "This place will always be your home." Nightmare didn't think of himself as dreaming, but as longing for a past that couldn't be reached. Though he was asleep, he couldn't stop thinking about his brother or the day he left. A part of him wanted to construct a delusion, a fictional world in his head where he recognized Nero's red flag sooner and chose to be cautious. A world where he could have been here, a safe life, even if it wasn't an exciting one. But no, he would have eventually run into trouble, he thought to himself. Some human would have eventually tried to hurt him, both of them. He could recall the day Dream was struck by a human during visitation, justifying to him the cruelty they all carried. And now, even after his proper sentencing, a human assaulted him where he was supposed to be safe, even if it meant the end of the world. He thought he could feel Dream's hands in his, squeezing them tightly. Nightmare shook his head. No, this isn't my home anymore. His home was with his friends, and with Killer. That's where he longed to be. He could see the smile on his brother's face slowly fade, a quiet acceptance in Dream's eyes. "I never wanted to disappoint you, but this is simply how things are. This world will never be safe until I make it safe." When next Nightmare opened his eye, it was late evening. He could feel soft hands holding his own. Next to him, Toriel rested, leaning over the bed. Though his hand was still shackled, she held it in both of hers, pressing it to her cheek. He didn't have the energy for this. To avoid her notice, Nightmare closed his eye and went back to sleep. For Nightmare's safety, he would be moved into a room in the palace, the windows freshly barred and more secure door installed. The room had been stripped of everything just to be sure nothing was left behind that would allow the skeleton to craft an escape. Nightmare found it a mockery, the place he once saw as home, now his prison. He felt no safer here than he had in the building with the other criminals. Whoever had come after him had slipped in without notice, and even weeks after, the assailant had never been found. Once Nightmare was healed enough to keep working, paranoia continued to haunt him. No matter how secure the guards assured him he was, he expected a return from the crimson-eyed human every night. Meanwhile, all trade between Edenfall and Rivaldo had completely ceased. This caused quite the economic backlash for both countries, though they equally started trading exclusively with the kingdom to the east to compensate. Both nations bordered the sea. Though neither had any form of an effective navy, Edenfall was more well off with the ocean trade. The economic pressure was not enough, so Killer would send Horror and Dust with several troops to harass Edenfall's eastern roads. They were to kill any humans they encountered, but take monsters hostage. These skirmishes turned the situation from an inconvenience to an active threat for Asgore. Even so, Asgore refused to release Nightmare and would send his own soldiers to combat the guerrilla attacks. When Killer heard that Nightmare had been assaulted in his cell, the teary skeleton spiraled into a deeper mental breakdown, his soul sparking with rage and hallucinations. Cross would find Killer stabbing one of his own guards to death. "Killer, stop! Stop!" Cross cried, wrangling the skeleton from the bloody corpse, the other guards standing awkwardly around them. "They tortured him, Cross! They're torturing him!" Killer cried as Cross clutched him close to calm him down. That assessment didn't make much sense, as it would be too great of a risk to harm Nightmare, even if Asgore had the heart for it. Still, Cross had to get Killer stable. That was his priority. Ordering the guards to take the corpse away, Cross took the knife from Killer and started wiping off the blood. "We have to go after him! We have to get him out of there!" Killer wept, his hands shaking. An extraction was in order, given all they wanted was Nightmare's return, and Asgore refused to make any bargain. It would be best for both nations for them to simply take Nightmare back through a secret rescue. Taking Killer in his embrace, Cross reassured him that they would get Nightmare back, and soon. They just needed to know where Nightmare was and to form a plan. The next day, Cross summoned the Spectre performers and the rest of the skeletons to a meeting at the university. In order to bring this conflict to an end, Cross needed help, specifically from Napstablook. "You want me to spy for you?" the little ghost asked nervously. "Not necessarily spy, but yes, I suppose there's not a better word for it." Cross tilted his head as he folded his arms. "We need to know the layout of Asgore's palace and where Nightmare is being kept. You must keep this a secret, but we intend to rescue Nightmare. It's the only condition we need to end hostilities." "Oh, I don't know about this." Napstablook looked down. "I suppose you'd be expecting Blukey to do this alone, yes?" Minotaur inquired. "I think he's the only one who can do this alone. You two are fully fused with your bodies, right?" Cross asked. "We can defuse, but it's difficult, and even harder to refuse, so pretty much, yeah," Mew Mew shrugged. "Wait a minute," said Killer, walking up beside Cross, rubbing his chin. "There's something that's been bothering me. Didn't it just so happen that one of the guards who'd been spying on Nightmare was also a ghost?" "You mean that doll girl," said Horror. Little sweat drops appeared on Napstablook's plasma. "You didn't happen to have anything to do with them, did you?" Killer tilted his head at the ghost. "Well, actually, they are my friend, but I didn't tell them anything that wasn't already—" Ah! As Killer lifted his hand, Napstablook's soul suddenly appeared, turning blue. The magic pulled the ghost closer to the knife-wielding skeleton, who pointed it at his soul. "Don't test me, you little bastard! I can kill you right now! Were you spying on us?" Minotaur and Mew Mew gasped at the sudden aggression. "Killer, stop!" said Cross, grabbing the hand that held the knife. "I didn't! I swear I never spied on you!" Napstablook pleaded. "Killer, let him go! We need him to help save Nightmare!" After a deep, frustrated breath, Killer finally set the ghost free. As the blue magic switched off, Napstablook teleported back to his cousins, who put their arms around him protectively. Killer turned away, shaking his head. Horror opened an arm, offering a comforting embrace for him, for which Killer accepted. "I'm sorry," Cross sighed. "Please, we really do need your help. If we can get Nightmare back, we can put an end to all this madness." "Blukey, you don't have to do this, especially after that," Mew Mew whispered. "No, it's all right," the ghost said, floating back to Cross. "If I do this for you, help you get back Nightmare, you promise you'll free all the prisoners you've been keeping?" The knight nodded. "Once Nightmare is back in Rivaldo and safe, I swear it. There won't be a single monster held prisoner here." "Okay, I'll do it. I can travel faster than other monsters. Give me 5 weeks, and I'll have the information you need." Putting all their trust in the little ghost, Cross went to bed that night, restless, but he didn't let anyone see how he was feeling. He had the most vivid dream he could ever recall, dancing in the ballroom of the palace back home. Nightmare at his side, but uncorrupted, with the appearance that he had in the portraits he'd stolen from Edenfall. So strange, Cross thought. Even though he knew what Nightmare used to look like, He only thought of him in the way he looked now. But as they continued to dance together, cross-leading, things about Nightmare began to change. His crown became gold, his arms bare, the violet suit changed to a golden gown. Slowly Cross realized he was not dancing with Nightmare, but with his twin, Dream, looking back at him with sunny eyelights and a warm smile. Dream? But why are you here? I'll never meet you, Cross mumbled. Holding his arm and shoulder, Dream's smile grew. One day you will need me. Call my name and I'll come to your aid. He spoke as sweet as honey. The words of the Light Guardian embedded in Cross's soul. Months would pass into winter. Snowfall graced the dark evening streets of Edenfall. Street lamps illuminated the darkness, revealing their poles to be decorated in evergreen wreaths, heavy with snowy crowns. 5 figures trudged through the snow, 4 in matching black uniforms. 1 towered above them all, covered in a light but floral-patterned sheet. Standing between 8 and 9 feet, the tallest skeleton had the skull of a horse, her brow covered in flowers, and a familiar feathered hat once belonging to a tiny ghost. Humming, her hands made of dead branches swayed about, conducting a tune as her jaw clacked happily. Her companions, however, were not as enthusiastic. Quietly walking alongside her, it was only a month prior that they were still in Rivaldo. The skeletons had expected Napstablook's return at any moment. Killer, especially, worried excessively if the ghost would return with the information they needed. Therefore, it was of great surprise when not a ghost, but a towering horse-headed puppet arrived at the university, requesting to meet with them. This can't possibly work, Dust mumbled to himself, arms folded, as he walked beside the others. No, listen, said the tall, horse-headed figure in a feminine voice. It's going to work. I mean, it's worked so far, said Cross, walking on the other side of their tall companion. There's a difference between being welcomed to the homes of farmers and being led into a royal palace, Dust grumbled. We'll just stick to the same story we have before, said Killer. If they say no, we'll just find another way in. That's the spirit, old chap, the horse skull said. Asgore wouldn't turn away a crew of poor shipwrecked sailors in need of shelter. We're sticking to the shipwreck story? Horror asked. Last time someone asked us about that, none of us knew a damn thing about boats. Don't worry, the guards won't know either, she quipped. When they allowed the horse puppet into the university, she introduced herself as Marie-Louise, formerly known as Napstablook. Though Cross was uncertain about her story at first, she produced a detailed map of Edenfall's palace, along with Nightmare's location and several paths in and out. In addition to the map, she had taken extra steps in forming a rescue plan. While still a ghost, Mari had gone around foretelling to the guards the blessings of the Marie-Louise. They say that one evening after Christmas, your door may be visited by the spirit of the Marie-Louise and her companions, she said, recounting her own fairy tale to the skeletons. She will challenge you in a series of songs and riddles. Should you win, she and her companions shall depart, never to be seen again. However, should you lose, you must give shelter to her entourage and provide endless cider till morning. But as a result, your house may be blessed with good luck for generations. Could such a fairy tale spread fast enough for their story to be believed? Well, they were about to find out as the gates of the palace came into view. As they expected, many armored guards stood vigilantly at the entrance, wearing heavy capes, and had a light layer of snow resting upon their shoulders. The grip on their spears tightened as they saw the 5 skeletons approach, the tallest making her way to the front to greet them with a dramatic bow. Oh, loyal soldiers, so brave and so true! Let us in, for I have come to bless this dwelling, for I am Marie-Louise, she announced loudly. As she began her rhyme, each skeleton pulled out a ring of bells from their pockets, clapping to the beat of her verses, just as she trained them to do on the journey here. Pardon me, ma'am, said one of the soldiers. It's nearly midnight. The king has no business with anyone at this hour. Do these blessings keep a schedule? Does the wind come when it's told? Fortune obey no man nor king. 'Tis foolish to let this rare chance fold. I'm sorry, ma'am, but we can't allow—
Hey, man, you got this totally wrong,
said one of the guards, slithering up to those at the gate. They were a large green snake monster with special outfitted armor, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and dark spectacles.
You gotta rhyme your responses. That's how the legend goes.
Captain Jockington! The guards gasped and saluted. Yes, of course, sir. One of them cleared their throat before trying to think of the right words. I can't believe this is working, Dust mumbled.
Dude, shut up,
Killer whispered back. The evening is cold and dark. You must turn away from this royal palace. Go back to where you came from, and take along your horse face, said the guard.
Oh my, a great challenger this be.
Mari began to dance, deeply swaying back and forth on her concealed legs.
But can he withstand my clever deed? For tidings of merriment we bring unto you, a fool to turn us away, if only you knew. The king and queen in their beds they sleep, started Jockington. The night is long and harrows deep. Keep your joys in the morning, keep. Perhaps you need your beauty sleep.
You used sleep twice. Horace shook his head disapprovingly. The guards also grumbled a bit at the careless rhyme.
1 for 1 and 2 for 2. My rhyme is now 3, and so shall be you, Mari said, shaking her arms in a wave. Impress me and I depart, but fail you must concede. A night of promised drinking you vow upon your creed. Though a prize of cider may you wait, this darkened night shall seal a fate, said Jockington. Say a prayer, I warn you, make, for the snowy night may keep your remains.
Tilting her brow, Cross thought the rhyme seemed ominously grim. Though watching the guard's reactions, he assumed the snake monster was simply bad at poems.
Aha! You have failed the challenge. Now you must let me and my crew in.
Mari pointed her barky finger at them.
Well done. You heard her, men. Let them in.
Jockington wiggled, his armor clacking as he did so.
I'm off to wake the king,
he said, before slithering off. As the gate started to open, Dust leaned against Horror for a moment, holding his head. I can't fucking believe it.
You know what they say, don't look a gift horse in the mouth!
Mari laughed, clacking her jaw. Cross took a deep breath of the cold winter air to steady his nerves. They were entering the heart of the beast now. Looking at Killer, he could tell the skeleton's fingers were itching to get to the knives under his coat. Grabbing Killer's hand, Cross squeezed it tightly, not only to provide some comfort, but to remind Killer that it wasn't time to fight yet. Killer's shoulders relaxed slightly as he looked at Cross. I'm alright. I'm not gonna fuck this up. Alright. Alright, Cross whispered back, letting him go. The guards would guide them across the courtyard, leading them up to the front doors. Despite how large the palace was, it was warm inside. The knight could see the swelter stones that had been shaped into bricks were evenly placed throughout the halls. A wave of nostalgia came over the knight, as much of the palace looked exactly like the home he had lost in his AU.
Wait, wait! Mari cried, waving her hands as they stepped into the marble floors. Before we meet with the king, the grounds must be blessed to ward off evil spirits.
What do you mean by that? The guard asked.
I will show you. Crewmen, bells ready? Give 1, 2, give me a beat, she commanded.
All 4 skeletons, their bell rings at ready, clapped to create a steady beat, following Mari as she started down the left hall.
Omni padre bad juju begone! Omni ragatuni, your curse upon your mom! Omni mimi, Sir Day Marilude has come!
Holding back a laugh himself, Cross could hear Horace slightly smirk at the ridiculous of the scenario, and yet the guards were completely eating this up. Following along, they watched in fascination as Mari continued to rhyme vague threats against evil spirits, none noticing as she led them up the stairs to the second floor and towards Nightmare's chambers. The bells echoed through the halls. The guards on the floor above grew alert as they had no idea about the procession heading their way.
4 guards posted at Nightmare's door. They stared at the tall, horse-headed monster rambling on, the guards to either side of her just staring. "What's going on?" one of them finally said as they stepped in the way of the door, blocking the hall. 2 were armed with swords and 2 with spears. "Oh hey, it's Mari Luoud! She's come to bless the palace!" said one of the guards, currently favorable to them. "What? Wait a minute. No, it can't be." The guard drew his sword. "You fool, those are Nightmare's commanders!" "Break loose, now!" cried Cross. In less than a second, the hall became littered with spiked bones, as each skeleton summoned them to kill the guards around them and push through those in their way. "Ah! I'm gone! Cried Mari, ducking behind them and running back to the stairs. Ignoring her, Cross and the others were able to take out most of the guards except 2, a pair of humans. One backed away, blowing a whistle. A second more, 2 mages appeared, one in yellow and one in violet. "Fuck, mages!" said Horror as he and Dust both summoned their blasters. They let off beams of power at the 2 mages and guards, but the mages held up their hands, forming shields. Meanwhile, inside the room, Nightmare was awakened first by the cries, and then the sound of raining bones and blasts. Not quite sure what was happening, he bolted out of bed, quickly throwing on his coat, scarf, and some boots. Sure enough, recognizing Horror's voice, Nightmare ran to the door. Still locked, the Dark Guardian banged his fist at the door, making whatever noise he could. "Nightmare, are you in there?" he heard Killer on the other side. Nightmare banged his fist again. Unable to answer, he tried striking the door in a musical pattern, hoping he'd understand. Though it was partially drowned out by the sound of blasters, magic, and screams. "All right, back up!" Killer cried. Nightmare did so as the door was splintered with bones, striking several times until it broke the hinges and cracked open. The Dark Guardian felt his bones tingle with excitement. Clutching his hands together, he held back tears. They had come for him. Through dust and a flash of light, Killer pushed his way in, meeting his gaze. "Nightmare!" As much as he wanted to say his name, Nightmare opted to run into his arms. Without thinking, they both started kissing, Killer lifting Nightmare from his feet. Doing so knocked the hat off Killer's head, but neither of them cared. "Killer! Nightmare! Get us out of here!" Cross shouted from the hall. "Shit, right!" said Killer, setting Nightmare down. The Dark Guardian shook his head, moving his mouth, but no words came out. Clutching the metal collar, he held it towards Killer, trying to tell him what it was. Confused for a second, Killer's sockets widened. "Huh? Nightmare, why aren't you saying—" Oh, is this how they've kept you here, isn't it?" Nightmare nodded ferociously. Suddenly, something gripped the back of Nightmare's coat, ripping him away from Killer. A familiar armored warrior with black hair under their helmet stood over him. Before Killer could react, both of them were teleported away. No! Nightmare panicked, taking a second to realize they teleported to the opposite wing of the palace. Asgore stood outside his room with several of the guards as they heard the blasts of magic echoing the halls. The king's eyes fixed on both of them. "Nightmare! Chris! What's going on?" "Chris?" Looking up the soldier, the skeleton caught another glimpse of those crimson eyes under the helm. It all rushed back to him at once. Memories of his childhood friend, the royal guard who was with Shiroba, the human who nearly beat him to death in his cell. "Nightmare's commanders have infiltrated the palace, trying to take him back," said Chris, still gripping the back of Nightmare's coat. As they spoke, Toriel stepped out of the bedroom. Chris shoved Nightmare forward and into Toriel's arms. "They must be deposed immediately. Chris, come with me," said Asgore, summoning his trident and rushing down the hall. The human nodded, following along with the rest of the guards as blasts continued to radiate out, shaking the walls. Fearing his friends would be killed, Nightmare tried to pull away, but Toriel gripped tightly to his arm. "Nightmare, wait! Come with me! Come with me!" she said, urging him into the bedroom. Uncertain, he didn't feel he had much of a choice in the matter. As she pulled him into the darkness, she closed the door behind them, desperation in her eyes. "This has to stop before anyone gets killed. Nightmare, I'm going to set you free, but you have to promise me something. If I do this for you, you have to make your men leave, in this war and the attacks along the roads. Set your prisoners free, and never return to Edenfall. Promise me." It took him a moment to absorb her words and the conditions she laid out. There was a baby crying from the crib in their room, which further caught him off guard. He hadn't been informed that they had another child.
Wait, she said never return to Evenfall. By that, she meant, "Promise me," she said, her voice growling as she gripped his shoulders. The emotions he sensed from her frightened him. Sadness, rage, fear, all twisted together and directed at him. The look in her eyes was no longer that of a caring mother, making him wonder if it had all been an act. Hesitantly and in terror, Nightmare nodded, for there wasn't any time for alternatives. He had to get to his friends before they were killed. Gripping his collar with her thumbs, Toriel took a deep breath and closed her eyes. "Release your hold. There is no more threat. Release your hold. It is time to rest." With the sound of a small click, Toriel opened the collar and dropped it. Instantly, Nightmare felt his roots curl back to life, feeling pins and needles after having no power for so long. The darkness and negative emotions trickled into his bones, making him feel one again with the shadows. However, as he stepped back, he continued to stare at Toriel, searching his mother's eyes for any love or care left for him. "What are you waiting for? Go!" she roared, hands curling into fists. Nightmare felt his soul sting to see her looking at him like this, but he could linger no longer. Dropping into his shadow, it would be the last time he'd ever see her again. The sound of blasters continued to go off. Nightmare darted through the shadows, taking him to the dark side of a chimney on the roof. There, Dust stood over Horror, who was injured, attempting to defend him from the ongoing blast of both human mages. With the snow covering everything, Nightmare always had trouble manipulating the shadows against it, so he couldn't drop the skeletons to safety like he normally would. Instead, he focused on attacking the mages. Sending roots into the shadows of the chimney, they struck out from inside the shadows of the mages' capes, impaling them. Their bodies dropped to the ground, their blood splattering across the snow. "Horror! Dust!" Nightmare called out to them. "Come here, to the chimney!" Both skeletons looked over before Dust grabbed Horror's arm over his shoulder. Horror grabbed at his injured hip. Quickly, Dust shortcut closer, stepping into the shadow where Nightmare sent them to a friendly Underswap AU where they could get healed. Now, he just needed to find Cross and kill her. The sound of fighting could be heard from the front courtyard. Running to the edge of the roof, Nightmare caught himself before the ice under the snow caused him to slip. The courtyard was surrounded by guards, most of them already wiped out by Killer and Cross's blasters, but both were running low on magic. They were unable to fight off the rest of the soldiers as Asgore had stepped into battle, swinging his red trident at both of them. Shaking his head, Nightmare didn't know what to do. He didn't want to kill Asgore, or any of the monsters, but he felt he had no choice. Lurching his roots over the side, they dug into the shadow cast by the palace itself. Roots struck out from the shadows of the human guards, starting to kill them. One was Chris standing next to Asgore, dueling against Cross. They were struck through the gut from inside their own cape. "Chris!" cried Asgore when he heard the human yelp in pain. "Nightmare's free!" cried Cross as he noticed the roots killing some of the guards. "Nightmare?" said Killer, looking around. But it was a mistake, a moment of distraction, leaving an opening. Just as Killer spotted Nightmare on the roof, Asgore's trident skewered him, lifting him into the air. "Killer!" Both Cross and Nightmare screamed. As Asgore slammed Killer against the icy cobblestone, Nightmare could feel his bones cracking. The shock, the fear, the agony, his soul sparking and shattering as the body began to disintegrate. No longer did Nightmare give a damn about his feelings for Asgore. Throwing himself from the roof, wailing like a demon, Nightmare's roots spread out like black thunder across the sky. The king turned, just catching a glimpse of Nightmare's expression before he impaled his body with dozens of roots, ripping the king to shreds before he can even dust. "Killer!" Nightmare cried again, throwing aside whatever remained of his father's body. Stumbling over the ice, Nightmare fell to embrace Killer. A faint eyelight appeared in one of Killer's sockets, focusing on him. Though his soul was shattered, Nightmare sensed the deepest of fears as Killer's bones were shaking. Looking around desperately, Cross had come to stand beside him, his swords and blasters ready to protect them. "Anyone, please! Don't let him die, please!" Nightmare pleaded. But it would be no use. Those that remained watched in stunned silence after seeing their king be torn to pieces. "No, please! Please don't leave me!" Nightmare said, tears flowing from his eyes. He held the dying skeleton close, growing lighter as he turned to dust. Boss, I don't want to die, Killer wheezed. Grunting in pain, Chris climbed back to their feet, holding their gut where Nightmare had stabbed them. Cross turned, his swords ready in case the human tried anything. Taking a deep breath, pulling off their helmet, Chris's hair was soaked in blood. Gritting their teeth through suffered breaths, they raised their sword to the air. Sparks of light erupted behind them in a series of pops before they plunged their blade between the stone, which erupted in a ray of light below them. Cross's ears stung from the siren sound of it. Squinting his eyes, the knight watched as the light quickly became a ray of darkness, bellowing shadows around Chris, filling the courtyard. "What the hell?" said Cross. "This darkness, it can't... No, stop!" cried Nightmare. Cross turned to his master as the darkness consumed them. Something strange was happening to Nightmare. His form rapidly faded into the darkness, like wind cutting through grass. Unable to hold on to Killer, his eye filled with horror as he reached out for Cross, but disappeared. Soon, everything was covered in the darkness, endless black all around the night, filled with the smell of blood and dust. "Nightmare? Nightmare, where are you?" Cross held out his blades, stumbling about without any light. At first, all was silent, then a distant sound, like a great iron switch flipped on, followed by a glow. A tower of stained glass stood in the distance, then another and another, all coming to light from the inside. They came on, closer and closer to Cross, until one was a few yards from him. Several spiral staircases suspended in space, made of glass panes, floated between each tower, forming a pattern that led into the distance. There, on the horizon, came a great roar, which threatened to shatter the glass and many motifs made of branches. A white star upon its face, within its chest glowed a brilliant golden light. It clutched its head, roaring in pain again as the ground shook. Staring, Cross couldn't comprehend what he was seeing. "Chris! Chris, you're hurt!" He heard a voice behind him. Turning to his right, Cross saw the human warrior who had changed the world with their dark magic. As they clutched their chest, a goat monster stood beside them in green robes, healing their wounds. "What is this? What the hell is going on?" Cross held one of his swords out towards them. "Where's Nightmare?" Oh my. You're in the dark world, and... Oh no, is that a titan?" said the goat monster, looking at the roaring beast in the distance. His expression turned to horror as he covered his mouth. "This isn't supposed to happen! Is that Nightmare? How is that possible?" "What?" Cross blinked, looking between the two of them and the creature in the distance. That couldn't possibly be Nightmare. Could it? "We'll take care of it. Come on," said Chris, gathering their strength and rushing for the floating stairs. Right," said the ghost monster, following after them. "Hey, wait a second!" Cross called out to them, making chase, but stopped as something caught his attention. A red spark. Looking back and to his left, he could see Killer's body there too. Cracked and fragile, but somehow it hadn't dusted yet. Above his chest, his soul was crackling, but started to reform. "Killer?" Cross watched as the human and goat monster ran further away, heading up one of the stained glass towers. But he turned back, as his companion had not yet perished. Climbing to his feet, bones twitching, Killer's soul was far more unstable than Cross had ever seen it. Still, it seemed to hold a vague shape. The black liquid that would normally drip from his eyes now flooded out, escaping his mouth and nose as well. His posture hung crooked, his head tilted as if ready to fall from his shoulders. "Killer?" Cross said, taking a hesitant step towards him. "Are you alive?" His skull twitched. Cross couldn't tell if Killer had heard him or not, but from Killer's hands, red knives appeared before he charged forward, aiming to strike at Cross. "Killer, wait!" Cross threw up his sword, blocking the incoming erratic attacks. "Killer, it's me! Cross! Snap out of it!" But Killer didn't stop, continuing to strike and teleporting around Cross, trying to land a hit. Luckily, Cross had fought alongside Killer long enough to know how to block his patterns. The last thing he wanted was to hurt or even kill his friend, especially if there was a chance at saving him. "Killer, please! Nightmare needs us!"
the knight pleaded, desperate to get the skeleton to come to his senses. After several minutes, knowing that the human and their friend were already well ahead and ready to decide Nightmare's fate, Cross had to take a risk. Butting in close, Cross threw his arms around Killer, grappling him. In an eerie hiss, Killer stabbed the knight in the back. Cross gritted his teeth in pain, but didn't let go. He grabbed Killer's head, holding it close. "Please, you have to come back to me. If we don't save Nightmare, everyone will die. He needs you. I need you." Though Killer tried to wiggle out of Cross' grasp, Cross held on with a death grip, determined that if he couldn't get Killer back, they would at least perish together. Finally, Killer seemed to calm down, burying his face in Cross's shoulder. Particles of dust floated in the air around them, as Cross could see Killer was still dusting, but at a much slower rate. The cry of the Titan echoed out again. As Cross looked up, he could see the human and goat monster had reached the tallest tower, and was striking the creature with magical blows. "I'm sorry, Killer. I should have protected you both, but I couldn't. All I wanted was to live the rest of my life with the four of you. I wanted to help Nightmare build a safer world for him and his brother." As the knives disappeared from Cross's back, he took a pained breath, his cape stained with blood. "Cross?" Killer whimpered, looking up at him. Still, the knight tried to put on a smile. "There's still a chance we can save him, but I need your help. Not realizing how injured he was, Cross stumbled to his knees. Killer caught him in his arms. "Damn it!" Cross wheezed, looking again as the human fought against the Titan. The star on its face shattered, showing nothing but a dark void beneath. Its branchy wings wrapped around itself protectively. Then Cross looked at the stained glass and the motif right in front of them. It showed abstract images of Nightmare before his corruption, standing side by side with Dream. The colors reminded the knight of the ballroom dream he had nearly 2 months prior. In his mind, he could see the face of Dream, smiling back at him with those eyelights he'd never behold while awake. The golden light in the Titan's chest, Cross realized it was Dream contained within. Of course, they were two halves of the same soul. Taking a deep breath, Cross cried out, "Dream! Dream, I need your help! Nightmare needs us, please!" Something like the sound of a droplet hitting water echoed out, filling Cross's skull. From the wounds on his back, he stopped feeling pain, instead felt a gentle warmth. Spawning from the wounds, a pair of brilliant golden wings sprung out, their feathers rustling like spring leaves. The wings moved outside of Cross's control, flapping to lift him into the air. Startled, Cross fought them a moment, if only to lift Killer more securely in his arms. "Hold on!" In seconds, both skeletons were flying up through the darkness, the wings carrying them swiftly towards the Titan. The air felt cold against his face, the stained glass towers glowing below them. As they got closer to the fight, Cross could see the sleeping, floating form of Dream inside the Titan's chest. The wings landed them upon a tower adjacent from the one with Chris and the goat monster, the former watching them with awe. "Something isn't right," he said. As Cross gently laid Killer down to his knees, he called out to the Titan with Nightmare's name. "Please, come back to us, we need you!" At that, the Titan turned, focusing its attention on Cross and Killer. Branching hands lifted and reached towards them. "Chris, wait!" cried the goat monster as Chris sent a slicing beam at the back of the Titan's head. Within the Titan's chest, Cross could see whatever injuries it sustained reflected on Dream's body, the back of his head bleeding. "Chris, I said stop!" The goat monster tried to grab the human's arm, but they shoved him away. "Back off, Rousey! We're supposed to defeat these things, aren't we?" said Chris. "We're right, but something is different about this one. It responds to Nightmare's name. It's conscious. If we kill it, that will be worse than the roaring," said Rousey. "Dream will die too. Light and darkness will cease together, along with all life in your world. Dream is the only one keeping everyone alive after the world tree fell." "I don't need a lecture. I need to know what we're supposed to do," Chris growled. As Cross watched this exchange, the injured Titan gently brought its hands around him and Killer. His eyes met with Rousey's, uncertain by the goat monster's words, but the knight sensed good intention. "We need to go and seal the fountain you opened," said Rousey.
But what if Nightmare gets away?
So what? Chris, let it go. I know what he did to you, but your hatred for him will destroy us all. Taking a breath, Rousey tried again to gently touch Chris's arm. Please, let them go. A gentle rumble like a coo escaped the Titan as it looked over the skeletons. Killer reached his hand up, but was too weak to hold it. Grabbing Killer's wrist, Cross held his hand up so he could touch the Titan's face. Defeated, Chris lowered their blade, relaxing their shoulders. Justice will never be served, will it? Justice will find a way, but it isn't now. Come on. Rousey nodded. Turning away, the two made their way down the glass staircase. The size of the Titan was shrinking. As it did so, its hands and arms focused on wrapping around Killer. Dream was pulled up to the tower as the Titan became too small to contain him. The Light Guardian collapsed onto the glass. Cross's wings disappeared, but he rushed forward, gathering Dream gently in his arms. The Guardian was hurt, but still alive. Dream, came Nightmare's voice. The Dark Guardian's form was still dark like that of the Titan. As he spoke, he stared at his brother, holding Killer in his arms. Please, wake up. I need you to save him, please. Realizing what Nightmare was requesting, Cross brought Dream closer, kneeling beside Killer. His friend didn't look too good. The red light of Killer's determination had faded, his bones so brittle they were barely keeping together. Nightmare, thank you, Killer whimpered. Thank you for loving me, he said, giving a smile through his tear-soaked face. The dark form that was Nightmare shook his head in denial, unable to hold Killer any tighter as his body was crumbling. There was no chance Dream could wake in time to save him. Suddenly, dark vines appeared, wrapping around Dream and pulling him down out of Cross's grip. The stump of the World Tree appeared underneath the night. Cold, icy air filled the night as snow fell and the world changed around them. The darkness faded back into the real world, where instead of the courtyard, they were now in the sacred grove. Killer! Killer, no! As Nightmare's form returned to normal, Killer finally turned to dust, his soul shattering. His remains coated Nightmare's arms and legs as the Dark Guardian remained frozen in despair. Guards, and worst of all, 5 human mages, surrounded them, aiming weapons and instruments of magic, shouting various commands. Cross looked around, taking it all in before hopping down from the stump, grabbing Nightmare in his arms. Nightmare! We banish you from this realm! Cried the mage, dressed in green. For your many crimes against this world, you may not return until after Dream wakes from his slumber, and then, only by Dream's decree will you ever return. Everyone, now! Their staffs aimed at the skeletons in chromatic colors. Cross wrapped his cape around Nightmare, clutching him tightly, uncertain about what the human's magic would do. Shutting his sockets, the knight braced for impact as the colors hit them in a flood of light. Then they were in darkness again, suspended in an endless void. Cross gasped, but there was no air to breathe. However, he did not suffocate. No noise, only darkness. Even the sound of his heaving was swallowed by the void. Looking down at Nightmare, the violet eye glowed in the dark. His face remained in shock. Nightmare, I'm sorry. Cross shook his head. His voice felt muffled here. Where is Dust and Horror? Did you find them before us? Slowly, Nightmare turned his gaze up at him, tears falling from his eye. I know. Cross held his head in comfort. But we need to get out of here. Can you take us somewhere safe? After a second, Cross felt Nightmare's roots wrap around them. The familiar feeling of shifting into the shadows came again. On the other side, they emerged behind an open door in a hospital, startling some of the staff as they had peered from out of nowhere. Sorry, said Cross, still carrying Nightmare. My friend, he isn't feeling well. Are there any other skeletons here, named Dust and Horror? They were on the surface of an underswap AU. With a little finagling, and Nightmare continuing to cling to Cross, they were eventually shown to the room where Dust sat by Horror, who had been treated for his injury. Cross! Nightmare! Said Dust, standing as they came in the doorway. Where? Where's Killer? Cross frowned, hanging his head. His grip around Nightmare tightened. He didn't make it. Dust and Horror's faces both turned to shock. Their friend, who they'd fought alongside for nearly a decade, was just gone. And on top of that, Nightmare wasn't speaking. Once Horror was allowed to leave, they found themselves in a small city just in view of Mount Ebod in the distance. The evening sun made the sky full of orange and pink clouds. The four of them looked out of place in their 16th century matching black uniforms, but they exuded such a dour aura that no one dared ask them about it. Since Nightmare remained in a state of shock, Cross continued to carry him as they headed out. A hotel nearby had a restaurant in it. They went there to relax and to try to process everything that had happened. In a scarlet booth with dark wooden tables, Dust opened the window and lit a cigarette. Given that there was no cigarette trays, this probably wasn't a permissible smoking area. But right now, no one gave a damn. Even the waiter that came to take their order could tell they weren't going to tolerate any shit. Killer's absence hung heavy over the entire party. Everything felt eerily quiet without him here to fill the silence. Unsure what to order, Horror just told them to bring out pancakes. But even when the breakfast dessert arrived, no one really partook of it. So, what now? Cross said, finally breaking the ice. Who fucking knows? Dust mumbled, his head arching back over the booth. If what you said was true, Cross, said Horror, finally scooting the plate of pancakes towards himself, slicing them up with a butter knife. If Nightmare had a spell cast on him, banishing him from Dreamtale, then the rest of us can't get back either. 8 years of all our work down the drain. I don't know what to do. Nightmare spoke weakly, his hands knitted together tightly on the table. I can't go home. All I can do is wait. Only Dream can let me back in. Raising his head, Nightmare looked at Dust, then Horror. I'll never be able to make our home safe for us. And now Killer's dead. I don't have a future without him. That's not true. Cross started to correct him, but he understood why Nightmare was feeling that way. They were all feeling it. Their purpose, their new lives had been ripped away. Now what was there? Nightmare didn't have anything to say as he leaned back, his hood hiding his face. Horror aggressively consumed one bite of the pancake, shook his head, then pushed it aside, unable to stomach it. We should have a funeral, said Dust. What? Nightmare looked up, his voice laced with offense. A funeral, you know, to say goodbye. He tapped the ashes of a cigarette on the table. It's what normal people do, isn't it? Looking away, Nightmare gripped the edge of the table, his nails digging into the wood. It wasn't an unusual thing to suggest, but maybe saying goodbye wasn't the thing the boss was ready for yet. Once again, Cross found himself taking the lead to help relieve Nightmare's burden. Let's just get a room and order some takeout, said Cross. Watch some movies, just... all of us get through this night however we can. I don't think right now is the time to think of what our future is supposed to be. Let's just get through this right now. Later, Nightmare would head off to explore the rooms of the hotel, finding them something spacious. 2 adjoined rooms with 4 beds. It wasn't luxury by any means, but decent enough for rest. Nightmare led them up to the rooms he had already unlocked. Cross ordered some takeout of fried rice, chicken, and vegetables to be delivered to the room. Though he wasn't sure any of them had the appetite to eat, it at least would be there if they got hungry. Hey, Nightmare, said Horror, looking across the room at his boss, who was watching the last of the sunset through the blinds. Do you need or want anything? Also looking at Nightmare, Cross watched the Dark Guardian slowly shook his head. No, I just... tired. If you watch movies, just keep it down. I want to go to bed. They figured he was just asking for time to be alone.
Cross would hang out with Horror and Dust in one room as Nightmare settled down in the dark of the other. Sitting between Horror's legs, Dust used the remote to browse the channels. Finally settling on a crappy ghost hunting show, it would be entertaining enough to shut off their thoughts. Cross tossed off his coat to settle down. He thought about everything they'd had to replace since all their possessions had been left behind in Dreamtale. Something to think about other than Killer. He started to nod off when the food arrived. By then, the skeletons finally had enough craving to eat. Using chopsticks, they traded the boxes between each other until they were satisfied. Cross thought about checking on Nightmare, but wasn't sure if he'd be asleep. Still, he'd do so quietly, seeing the Guardian curled up tightly in bed. Figuring he was asleep, the knight turned away when he heard Nightmare's voice. "Cross." "You're awake?" Cross whispered, stepping closer. "There's some food left. Came to see if you were hungry." "No, thank you." "Did you fall asleep at all?" Sitting up slightly, Nightmare looked at him. His pillow was stained where his tears had mixed with the blight soaking the pillowcase. "No." "You can hang out with us. Trying to force yourself to sleep isn't going to help." Cross shook his head. "Maybe." Nightmare laid back down. "My socket hurts." "I could get you some ice." "Okay," he said sleepily. Cross would step out to get ice from the machine in the hall. When he returned, Nightmare was sitting up in bed, staring with a wide socket into the darkness. Grabbing a towel from the bathroom, he wrapped up the ice before sitting beside the Guardian and pressing it to his eye. "Here." Nightmare took it and continued to hold it with a shaky breath. "Nothing feels real." "Yeah." "You know, we talked about starting a family a few times. I wouldn't lose my immortality, and that way I would have some part of him to carry on until Dream woke up. But that's all gone now. He's gone. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Slowly, Nightmare shook his head, his teeth gritting. I can't do this without him. Just find some spell to put me to sleep too. I don't want to live without him." Cross felt his soul sink as Nightmare wept. As he leaned forward, Cross put his arms around him and held him, letting him cry. He felt so small, his bones rattling before he was gasping for breath between cries. Unable to hold down his despair any longer, Nightmare screamed into Cross's chest, his fingers digging into his back. But the knight didn't stop him, only reminded him to breathe when he felt Nightmare's grip grow weak. The door to the other room opened. Dust and Horror looked in to make sure everything was all right. Cross gave them a quiet nod before they stepped in, coming to sit on the other bed as well. When Horror touched Nightmare's back, he looked up to the other two. His face had grown patchy from the tears, revealing parts of his skull under the blight. Nightmare would turn to hug Horror as well, Dust and Cross joining the embrace to cry together. Nightmare held them all in his roots as they wept, slowly accepting the loss of their friend. Horror would end up pushing the beds together so they could stay close, helping Nightmare to finally fall asleep in their company. However, when Cross next woke, he wasn't where he expected to be. The hotel room was gone. He laid in a bed alone in a cold stone room, head aching with a migraine. As he sat up, it felt like something was inside his skull, in the back of his head. Fingers in his sockets, Cross couldn't reach it, whatever it was, without hurting himself. Was it some sort of nightmare? No, this felt too real. A chill went through his bones as his eyes adjusted to the dark. The bedroom was styled as though it was part of an old castle. "Nightmare? Dust? Horror?" he said, holding his head as he got to his feet. Could Nightmare have brought him here while he was asleep? It was hard to think of that happening, since Nightmare had never moved them while they were unconscious unless they'd been hurt. Opening the iron latch, he pushed through the heavy wooden door into the dark hallway. His attention was caught by the sound of rustling as he looked down the hall to see a ghostly form. It was a skeleton monster with a broom, sweeping. But what startled Cross was the translucent form before him looked exactly like his father. Gaster? The ghostly skeleton looked up at him and froze. He smirked, a devious smile on his face. What are you doing here? He said, his hand tightly gripping the door handle, ready to dodge back into the room if he had to. Gaster tilted his head. Are you lost, little skeleton? He said in that unmistakable voice. The master left you here some time ago. Master? What are you talking about? Why are you here? What happened to... Cross, is that you? Dust's voice came from the opposite end of the hall. Cross froze, still not knowing what was happening as Dust rounded the corner, bones in his hands, ready to attack. The red-eyed skeleton looked between Cross and Gaster before he came closer. Cross, are you all right? Where are we? I'm fine, I think. My head feels weird, like something is stuck inside it. I don't know where we are, said Cross. Have you seen Horror or Nightmare? Dust stopped beside him. No, I haven't. The master is out, the ghostly Gaster spoke. He will be back in due time. But both of them stared at the ghost, Dust's shoulders stiffening. Right, and who is your master? The Lord of Darkness Nightmare, of course. So Nightmare did bring us here, said Cross. I don't like this. Let's try to find Horror, said Dust, turning away. Cross sensed that whoever this was who looked like his father definitely wasn't him. Following Dust, he kept an eye over his shoulder as the ghost continued to smile. You said your head felt off. Mine does too, said Dust. It feels like something crawled in and got stuck while I was asleep. Yeah, exactly. Continuing to explore the castle, they ran into more of those ghostly figures, all of them with Gaster's appearance. Though they were noticed by them, the ghosts would only smile and continue their servant duties. They all look like Papyrus, Dust mumbled. What? No, they look like Gaster, said Cross. Huh? Dust stopped and looked at him, then back at a servant who was fixing a purple tapestry on the wall, depicting a golden apple. No, that's definitely Papyrus. Was he going mad? No, I'm sure that's Gaster. The servant looked over, giggling at their conversation. Are we not seeing the same thing? Said Cross. Let's just find Horror. Continuing on, they would walk out to a second-story balcony hanging over a throne room. Many of the ghostly servants were carrying in new tapestries, some working together to hang them from the ceiling. Cross and Dust decided to find an exit so they could get a scope of the castle and narrow down where Horror could be. None of the servants bothered them as they descended the stairs, heading out the throne room and down a large corridor to the massive open doors. Outside, they were struck by the view of a gray sky. A massive tree stretched down from the heavens, covering the earth in a forest of roots. Is that the World Tree? Said Dust. I think so. It looks like we're at the bottom of it, said Cross. Dust! Cross! They heard Horror call out. Looking back at the castle, Horror waved from one of the windows before using his blaster to ride down to them. Dust took a sigh of relief. What is this place? Said Horror as he landed beside them, looking up at one of the castle towers. There was wooden scaffolding all around it as the ghostly figures were nearly finished completing its construction. What's with all these undyings everywhere? Undyings? Cross and Dust said at the same time. So we are seeing them as different people, said Cross. The master has returned, said one of the servants, flying out to tell a few others. The master has returned, they repeated, shuffling inside. Was this something Nightmare had been working on all these years and hadn't told them? With only glances between them, all three skeletons rushed back inside. They walked past the servants lining the hall, Cross still not quite getting over them having his father's face. He could hear Nightmare's voice echo just as they stepped into the throne room, seeing him standing before someone new. See? Now this way you can all live forever. This new skeleton wore a blue jacket with a furred collar, white shorts with black stripes, and untied tennis shoes. Standing in front of him, Nightmare held his hands, kissing the back of each before acknowledging the others. "Cross, Dust, Horror, you're awake! Good." Nightmare smiled, but the light in his eye was empty. His smile was a twisted, sickening grin that poorly concealed his turmoil. "Great news! Killer's back!" Nightmare held one of his hands out as the new skeleton gazed at them. He looked exactly like Killer, but there was no familiarity in his expression. The tears on his face were fresh, his grin full of emptiness and pain like nightmares. No, this wasn't their Killer. This was someone else. "We have a new mission," Nightmare declared. "Though banished we are from our home, we will make sure those who cast us away regret their choice. We will craft 1,000 paradises and wipe humans from every world. When Dream awakens, he'll be able to leave with us to settle anywhere in the multiverse. This is my new purpose, our new purpose. Join us, friends. We shall dominate all realities." Dust and Horror stood silently across the sides, the three of them stunned by the morbidity of the scene. As Cross stared into the empty sockets of this killer he didn't know, he felt his soul and bones flood with emotion. Disgust, rage, horror, despair. Killer's dust was barely cold. Finally, Cross turned his gaze to the Dark Guardian, his closest friend for the past 9 years. The light of the stained glass windows framed him like a mad king, his expression only desiring their approval and nothing more. "Nightmare, what the fuck did you do?"